A lot of us were shocked to see that when we woke up, Russia had invaded Ukraine. Russian troops were doing a full-scale invasion on sovereign European territory. But what if I told you that it's not just that? It's not just Putin, it's not just Ukraine, it's not just the EU, it's not just the US, it's not just NATO. In fact, one of the most important connections that is not being made right now is China's connection to this. Because China's connection, or at least the Chinese government's connection to Russia, Putin, and this entire crisis is both sinister, disturbing, and definitely needs to be discussed. After weeks of people telling me that Russia would never invade, the chickens finally came to roost, proving that the incessant claims from US intelligence that Russia was in fact readying for a full-on invasion of Ukraine were correct. Now, I've been studying and documenting Chinese propaganda for years. I lived in China for 10 years and I speak Chinese, but for the first time in my life, I became a target of the fabled Russian propaganda. Family members, acquaintances, people that just wanted to know were sending me videos of straight up Russian propaganda. And let me tell you, although a lot of it was masquerading as some sort of pro-American kind of nationalistic patriotic blog posts, a lot of it was actually exactly like Chinese propaganda on channels that would say things like, wow, look at these foreigners that chose to move to Russia. They love Russia so much. Russia is amazing. Then all of a sudden, bam, scripted video about justification for war propaganda straight up on the channels. It's literally just like China. And my interest peaked when I noticed a very clear connection between Russia and China, especially when it came to this war. Faced with this prospect of a new alliance in the East, or should I say Axis, I wanted to dive deeper into what is driving China's actions to simultaneously support the Russian government in its horrific invasions, and also act like they have nothing to do with it. Because trust me, the Chinese government has a very big role to play. Xi Jinping, the leader of China, and his ambitions to reverse all of China's progress and create a new order in Asia has backfired spectacularly. While many small battles have been won, like forcing debt trap alliances with countries beholden to them, the larger war for people's hearts and minds has been lost. Blaming the world for their mishandling of COVID and the cover-up that preceded, the genocide of Uyghurs in Western China, the straight-up military threats on Taiwan, all while calling the Western world their enemy, has forced like-minded dictators to act accordingly and to scramble to portray legitimacy whilst cutting their people off from the rest of the world. Xi Jinping's cult of personality, forcing children to worship him, his thoughts and teachings in textbooks, and brainwashing a populace into thinking that everyone wants the worst for Chinese people, and only he possesses the strength to save them. Does any of this sound familiar? Putin is the same. The justifications of a madman to reclaim the former Soviet Union's glory. The delusions of taking back lands lost to democracy and independence. The justifications for war by calling Ukrainians Nazis, and the Western aggressors and bullies all trying to throw a wrench into Russia's supremacy. The motivations are strikingly similar, and like Russia, China risks losing it all if they pick the wrong side. And guess what? They have. China-Russia cooperation has no upper limits. The friendly bears coming together to bring peace to the world. The big bad meanies in the White House and the EU want nothing but war and destruction, while China and Russia, well, they just want peace and development. This new era of peaceful allies in the East was bolstered with cooperative concerns. Yeah, Russia just has troops building up on the border because of national security concerns, just like us, said China. Ukraine belongs to Russia, just like Taiwan. Justification complete. Of course, Russia will make territorial claims. We do the same thing. China has claimed for many years now that Taiwan is a part of their own sovereign territory, despite the fact that Taiwan has its own government, currency, nationality, and fully blossomed democracy. Unlike China, though, who uses the threat of a Taiwan invasion and to reclaim Taiwan for domestic propaganda to placate their own citizens, Russia pulled the trigger, literally. However, in typical Chinese government fashion, they had to lie when the war broke out. A lot of people think that China was surprised by the invasion. Whilst the citizens may have been surprised, Xi Jinping and the leadership, they knew about it. And what would you think if I told you that leaked documents show that the war was approved in January and was to take place after the Winter Olympics? Xi Jinping and Putin both agreed that the war was totally fine. But you gotta wait until the Olympics is over because the spotlight's on China at the moment. When Ukrainians started to flee, China first put out the state narrative that no one is fleeing. There's no war. What are you talking about? This is all CIA propaganda, and the roads are not full of cars driving to safer areas. Kiev is functioning as per normal, or so the Chinese government said. You see, when this proved to be false, China had to pick a side. The Chinese people were pretty confused. I thought there was no war. I thought that Ukraine was a sovereign country. I thought that we were supposed to stay out of all these types of conflicts. You see, China's state narrative is that they never get involved in other countries' internal affairs. It's been their prerogative since day one because that's the only way they can keep legitimacy. It's the only way they can convince their people that all of the censorship, all of this insane authoritarian rule over their people is justified because everyone just wants to get inside and manipulate China. In a full-on censored dictatorship like China, people are used to the government telling them what side they're supposed to take and why they shouldn't worry because the Chinese government will always have their best interests in mind. Like clockwork, that narrative permeated the news and blogs and the general sentiment. Russia was the right team to choose. We are lifelong brothers with Russia. They also hate those Western bullies, and the invasion of Ukraine is justified. Cue the Nazi propaganda. Ukraine is full of Nazis and the Donbass region has been suffering from genocide. Of course, Russia will come in to save the day. Yes, there is an invasion now. It just took a little while for the news to catch up. You know, the fog of war and all that was their justification for saying that there was no war in the first place. Do you know what came next? State-sponsored elation, celebration. Russia will steamroll Ukraine with little to no resistance, just like we will do to Taiwan when we finally reclaim it. The Chinese government thought that Russia would take Ukraine in a split second, and the Chinese government, by association, will also be the victor, who took Putin's side in this quick, easy, and justified conflict. You see, for China, they might suffer a little bit of bad press in the short term, but they picked the winning side. So who cares? Oops. Not only did a huge portion of the world unite against the Russian government, but even the Russian people themselves took to the streets, not only globally, but in Russia, to oppose the war. The average Russian citizen did not want this. Celebrities in Ukraine joined the military and stopped a blitzkrieg that was only supposed to take a very short amount of time. Even the president of Ukraine became a hero across the world as he put himself in the middle of the conflict and kept a cool head while giving Russia an absolute bear of a time in its invasion. Globally, people donned blue and yellow, and a massive wave of support broke down differences and boundaries as the world rallied around Ukraine and agreed that the Russian government had spiraled out of control and become a full-on villain. This was not the optics that China needed. Scrambling, they put out their foreign spokespeople. They needed a solution. This invasion was supposed to be quick. Russia said that it would forge an alliance between China and Russia, and the West would just give up and slink on back home. What's going on? So what was the solution? The Chinese leadership racked their brains. I know, it's the US. It's all the US's fault. The finger pointing started. The US started this war. We didn't pick the wrong team. We had nothing to do with it. It's simply Russia pushing back against the evil aggressor that is America. And we need a rebrand pretty quickly. We never supported Russia or Ukraine officially. In fact, we called for de-escalation. No one's gonna read between the lines. Wrong. China was one of only 3 countries that chose to abstain from condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China was forced to make statements. The US is not qualified to tell China what to do on the issue of respecting national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Washington set the fire by sending weapons to Ukraine, heightening tensions, creating panic, and hyping up the possibility of warfare. China would consistently oppose all illegal unilateral sanctions. In fact, an Asia Society article put it best. Diplomatically, Russia's aggression has put China in a very awkward position, given its extensive economic relationship with Europe. Now China is trying to have its cake on Ukraine and eat it too, pretending to a wider audience, including the Europeans, that it supports the inviolability of sovereign borders under international law, while also providing diplomatic and, more critically, economic support for Russia, despite its direct violation of Ukraine's borders. This doublespeak is unlikely to fool anybody. Guys, the reality of the situation is that you, no matter where you are supposed to think that China is being the reasonable one here. In fact, you're about to see Western paid propagandists who work for the Chinese government make a major shift in their rhetoric. I want you to know how to spot this. First, they showed their support for the invasion and demonized Ukraine, and they did so because they were told to do so. In fact, all Chinese media was supposed to block anything anti-Russia or pro-Ukraine. They made it a law. In fact, this law started in 2015, where Russia and China both came together and said, "Us dictators think alike. No more shit-talking each other. We are not allowed to say anything negative about each other in state media anymore." Fast forward back to now, and following the shift in Chinese state narrative, like I just told you about, they blamed it on the evil West and the evil USA.
During this period, they continued to oppress and liquidate Russian and pro-Russian forces in Ukraine. And now Ukraine has become a colony of the United States and can even aim missiles and nuclear weapons at Moscow.
Following that, you have the sneakiest of approaches. The slimiest, the most evil approach that you're about to see is that Chinese propaganda will show their support for peace. And even some of them show their support for Ukraine to say that China doesn't and hasn't taken a stance at all. This is a sophisticated and very evil approach to convince you that China is not the bad guy here and that you are just lost in this Russia versus Western media fake news madness. In reality, Xi Jinping has put his full support behind Putin. China is getting massive kickbacks with gas, technology, and profit from this conflict. Chinese import restrictions on Russian wheat have been lifted. The natural gas exports from Russia to China have been agreed upon to be tripled. They've agreed to stop using the dollar for their financial and trade relationship, to bypass US sanctions, and found a way to use a Chinese system that bypasses SWIFT banking restrictions. By not supporting Western sanctions, China gets to buy and sell to Russia to their heart's content. In fact, Russia has cut China so many deals here that it might repair some of their horrific economic slowdown. Russia can deal with crippling sanctions with greater ease, with China effectively sidestepping all of the sanctions, and leaders in charge of this corrupt, despotic madness profit to the magnitude of billions of dollars. Don't be fooled. China's gonna play good guy here and act like a mafia villain in the background. This has massive implications for the future of the world, and it's your job not to fall prey to the insane amount of Chinese and Russian propaganda. Russia's already made its bed, and for the time being, China's right there under the covers with them. My buddy Jordan Harbinger did a fascinating interview with a guy named Clint, who actually goes into in depth the world of fake news and how China and Russia and all these places kind of intervene and interfere with our lives. And it's absolutely worth a listen. I definitely recommend after you're done watching this video, go check it out because he talks about how these hostile entities, like the one we're talking about here, they use social media for propaganda and recruitment. Talks about why this kind of creates social media bubbles and how it's super dangerous. Clint also talks about how we can kind of fix this problem, how we can change how much effect this has on our lives. And it's really, really fascinating. Go down below. It's completely free in the description after the show, and check out the link. Also, my buddy Jordan has an amazing show. People often ask what I listen to in my own free time, what I watch in my own free time. It's my favorite podcast. It's completely free. Definitely go follow it. Go subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Definitely check it out. It's a fantastic show. Thank you so much for your support on patreon.com/Lao86. I really appreciate you guys. I talk to you guys every single day on there, and I really appreciate you guys supporting my work going forward. Thank you so much, Laowinners, and I'll catch you on the next one.